Tom Bradley was counting his remaining fuel reserves when the silver Mercedes pulled into his driveway, kicking up a cloud of Nebraska dust that hadn't seen rain in 3 weeks. At 72, he'd weathered enough hard seasons to know this. Drought was different, but it was the woman stepping out of that luxury car who would change everything. She wore city clothes that looked absurdly out of place against the backdrop of dying corn stalks, her designer heels sinking into the gravel as she clutched a GPS device like it was her last lifeline to civilization. "Excuse me, sir," she called, out, shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. "I'm completely lost. My GPS keeps telling me to turn into wheat fields, and I haven't seen a proper road sign in 20 miles. Tom set down his clipboard and walked over, wiping weathered hands. On his overalls, he had no idea that this simple act of rural kindness would soon bring federal helicopters landing in his west pasture and uncover a conspiracy that threatened the nation's food supply. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun hung low over Millbrook Valley as Tom approached the lost traveler. Up close, he could see the frustration etched on her face, mixed with something else he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way her eyes kept darting to the horizon, or how her fingers drummed nervously against the useless GPS device. "Where you trying to get to, miss?" he asked, his voice carrying the patient cadence of someone who'd spent a lifetime helping neighbors through tough spots. "I'm looking for the Agricultural Research Station," she replied, then hesitated. "But I think I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere after Lincoln." Tom couldn't help but chuckle. The research station was a good 40 miles in the opposite direction, and she'd somehow managed to find her way down Cedar Ridge Road, a stretch of gravel that most locals avoided during the dry season. "Well, you're a fair piece from where you want to be," he said, glancing at her car. "That fancy GPS of yours probably got confused by all our back roads. They don't update these maps much out here." The woman sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. "I have an important meeting at 5, and it's already past 3. Is there any way?" She trailed off, looking at the endless expanse of farmland surrounding them. Tom studied her for a moment. There was something about the way she carried herself, a certain alertness that seemed at odds with her claimed confusion. But his Emma had raised him right, and turning away someone in need wasn't the Bradley way. "Tell you what," he said, making a decision that would upend his quiet life. "I was heading into town anyway to pick up some supplies. The research station's not exactly on my way, but I know a shortcut that'll get you there with time to spare. You can follow me if you'd like." Relief flooded her features, but again Tom caught that flicker of something else, something calculating. "That would be incredible. Thank you so much, Mr. Bradley. Tom Bradley. And you are?" She extended her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Rachel Martinez, Dr. Rachel Martinez." As they shook hands, Tom noticed the slight calluses on her palm, not the soft hands of someone who spent all their time in laboratories. But he pushed the observation aside. The drought had everyone on edge, making him see shadows where there were none. "Well, Dr. Martinez, let me just tell my wife where I'm headed, and we'll get you sorted out." Tom walked back to the house, where Emma stood watching from the kitchen window. She'd seen the whole exchange, her keen eyes missing nothing after 48 years of marriage. "City folk lost again?" she asked as he entered. "Seems that way. Says she's heading to the research station. Thought I'd show her the way." Emma studied his face, reading the unspoken questions there. "You be careful, Tom. Something about this drought's got everyone acting strange." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "Just being neighborly, Em. Back before supper." As he returned to his truck, Tom noticed Dr. Martinez taking photos of his farm with her phone, her movements quick and purposeful. When she saw him approaching, she quickly lowered the device. Beautiful property you have here, she said, a bit too casually. How long has your family owned it? Coming up on 4 generations now, Tom replied, climbing into his worn pickup. My great-grandpa homesteaded this land back in 1892. Been Bradley's on Cedar Ridge ever since. He started the engine, which coughed to life with the reliability of proper maintenance. Just stay close behind me. Some of these turns come up quick. As they pulled out of the driveway, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a simple case of poor navigation. He'd lived in Millbrook Valley. His entire life had seen his share of lost tourists and confused city folks. But something about Dr. Martinez set off his internal alarm bells, the same instinct that had kept him farming successfully through decades of unpredictable weather and market fluctuations. The gravel road stretched before them, a ribbon of dust. In the fading afternoon light, Tom kept his speed moderate, checking his rearview mirror frequently to ensure the Mercedes was keeping up. They passed the Wilson farm, its for sale sign now weathered and leaning, another casualty of the changing times. Then the Henderson place, where weeds had begun to reclaim what was once prize-winning soybean fields. About 3 miles down, Cedar Ridge Road. Tom noticed another vehicle in his mirror, a black SUV maintaining a steady distance behind Dr. Martinez. It wasn't unusual to see traffic on these roads, but something about the way it moved, always keeping the same gap, made him uneasy. He'd seen enough nature documentaries with Emma to recognize predatory behavior when he saw it. At the intersection of Cedar Ridge and County Road 12, Tom pulled over and got out of his truck. Dr. Martinez stopped behind him, lowering her window. "Everything okay?" she asked, that nervous energy still evident in her voice. "Just wanted to point out a landmark," Tom said, gesturing to an old windmill on the horizon. "See that? If you ever get lost out here again, that's the Muller windmill. Been standing since 1915. Keep that to your west, and you'll always find your way back to the main highway." As he spoke, he casually glanced at the black SUV, which had pulled over about 100 yards back. Through the tinted windshield, he could make out 2 figures, their shapes rigid and alert. "Mr. Bradley," Dr. Martinez said, drawing his attention back. "I really appreciate this, more than you know." There was weight in her words that seemed disproportionate to the simple favor he was providing. They continued their journey, turning onto County Road 12, which would eventually connect to the state highway leading to the research station. The land here showed the drought's impact more severely, with irrigation pivots standing idle over parched earth. Tom had been forced to make similar decisions on his own farm, choosing which fields to water and which to let go fallow. It was like choosing between children, each acre holding memories and potential. "Must be tough, Doctor. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Martinez observed as if reading his thoughts. "The drought, I mean. How are you managing?" Tom shrugged, the universal gesture of farmers facing hardship. "We make do. Got a well that hasn't run dry yet, thank the Lord. But if we don't get rain soon..." He let the sentence hang, unfinished. Every farmer in the county was finishing that sentence in their own way, most of them not optimistic. "Have you noticed anything unusual about this drought?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly. "Anything different from previous dry spells?" The question seemed oddly specific, and Tom found himself choosing his words carefully. "Every drought's got its own personality, I suppose. This one's been stubborn, that's for sure, and the soil." He paused, uncertain why he felt hesitant to continue. "What about the soil?" Dr. Martinez pressed, leaning forward slightly. Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Nothing. Just seems different this year is all. Probably my imagination." But it wasn't his imagination, and he knew it. The soil in his west pasture had been behaving strangely for months. retaining moisture in ways that defied the drought conditions. He'd mentioned it to Jake, his son, who'd suggested they get it tested, but Tom had held off, some instinct telling him to keep quiet about the anomaly. They drove in silence for a while, the only sound the crunch of gravel under tires and the whisper of hot wind through the windows. The black SUV maintained its distance, a constant presence in Tom's mirror. As they approached the turnoff for Highway 30, Tom made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of taking the direct route to the research station, he continued straight onto a rarely used farm road that would add 20 minutes to their journey, but would reveal whether the SUV was truly following them. "I thought we were turning back there," Dr. Martinez said, a hint of tension in her voice. "Construction on the highway," Tom lied smoothly. "This way's longer but more reliable this time of day." He watched her face carefully and saw the flash of uncertainty quickly masked. She pulled out her phone, typing something rapidly before putting it away. The farm road wound through some of the most isolated parts of Westfield County, past abandoned homesteads and fields that hadn't seen a plow in decades. It was here, away from prying eyes, that Tom had discovered something extraordinary 3 months ago, something he hadn't even told Emma about. The west corner of his property bordered an old creek bed, dry now for 20 years. But beneath that cracked earth, something was happening that defied explanation. "Mr. Bradley," Dr. Martinez said suddenly, "I think I should tell you something." Her voice had changed, losing its nervous quality and taking on an official tone. "I'm not actually headed to the research station." Tom nodded slowly, unsurprised. "Figured as much. That SUV following us, friends of yours?" She turned to look back, her expression grim. "No, and that's part of the problem." Tom's foot eased off the accelerator slightly. "Mom, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I've got a wife waiting for me at home and a farm that needs tending. Maybe it's best if we part ways here." "Please," she said urgently, "just hear me out. I'm a hydrologist with the Federal Agricultural Security Division. We've been investigating unusual water table activities across the Midwest, and your farm is at the center of something potentially catastrophic." Tom felt his stomach tighten. The strange behavior of his soil, the mysterious moisture retention, the fact that his crops were surviving while his neighbors withered, it all suddenly felt connected to this woman's appearance. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said carefully, but his tone lacked conviction. Dr. Martinez, if that was really her name, pulled out an identification badge. The holographic seal caught the late afternoon light, unmistakably official. "Mr. Bradley, your farm sits on top of what we believe is an illegally modified aquifer system. Someone has been conducting unauthorized geoengineering experiments, and the results could affect water supplies for 6 states. Tom's mind raced. 3 months ago, he'd been approached by representatives from agritech industries, offering to buy his farm for 3 times its market value. When he'd refused, they'd gotten pushy, then threatening. But he'd held firm, just as his father had taught him. The Bradleys didn't sell out, no matter the pressure. "The black SUV," he said slowly. "Agritech? We believe so. They've been acquiring farms across the region, all sitting on specific geological formations. Yours is the key piece they need to complete. Whatever it is they're doing." She glanced at her phone again. "Mr. Bradley, I took a huge risk coming here alone, hoping to make contact without alerting them. But they're watching everyone who investigates the drought patterns. I needed a way to reach you that wouldn't trigger their surveillance. So, you pretended to be lost." Tom felt a mixture of admiration and annoyance at the deception. "And now what? You've led them right to me." "No," she said firmly. "You led me to them. This detour wasn't random, was it? You knew they were following us." Tom allowed himself a small smile. City folks always think country people are simple. We notice things, Dr. Martinez, like when a fancy Mercedes shows up right after I refuse another buyout offer, like when someone's hands don't match their story. You've got farmers' calluses, ma'am. Laboratory work doesn't do that. She looked at her hands, then back at him with newfound respect. I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. Lost it to corporate agriculture when I was in college. That's partly why I'm in this job. The admission created a moment of connection between them, two people who understood the weight of soil between their fingers. What do you need from me? Tom asked, making another decision that would change everything. Access to your west pasture, she replied immediately. There's something happening underground there that could explain the entire drought pattern. But more than that, I need your help exposing this before Agritech completes their acquisition plan. You're the last holdout, Mr. Bradley. Once they have your land, we might never understand what they've done to the water table. Tom thought of Emma waiting at home, of Jake, who'd moved to Lincoln but still came home every weekend to help with the farm, of his neighbors, watching their livelihoods dry up while corporate interests circled like vultures. All right, he said finally, but we do this my way. First, we lose that tale. What followed was a masterclass in rural navigation. Tom led them through a maze of farm roads, tractor paths, and even a shallow creek bed, using his lifetime of local knowledge to shake their pursuers. The Mercedes struggled at times, but Dr. Martinez proved herself a capable driver, following his pickup through terrain that would have stopped most city drivers. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, they finally pulled into a concealed spot near the old Mitchell barn, abandoned since the farm crisis of the 80s. The black SUV was nowhere to be seen. They'll find us again, Dr. Martinez said, checking her phone. But you've bought us some time. I need to contact my team. No cell service out here, Tom informed her. It's why I chose this spot. Now, before you call in the cavalry, I want the whole truth. What's really happening to our water? In the fading light, with shadows lengthening across the valley he'd called home for 7 decades, Tom Bradley listened as Dr. Rachel Martinez explained a conspiracy that stretched from corporate boardrooms to government offices, all centered on the most precious resource in farming country, water. The drought isn't entirely natural, she began, pulling out a tablet from her bag. Someone has been experimenting with deep aquifer manipulation, using a technology that was supposed to be theoretical. They're essentially creating artificial drought conditions to drive down land prices, while simultaneously controlling underground water flows to specific locations. Let me guess, Tom interjected. Locations where Agritech just happens to have bought land. She nodded grimly. Your farm is sitting on what we call a confluence point. The natural geology here makes it perfect for controlling water flow across the entire region. With your land, they could literally decide which areas get water and which don't. Tom felt a cold anger building in his chest. They're playing God with people's livelihoods. Families are losing farms that have been in their hands for generations. It's worse than that, Dr. Martinez continued. We believe they're planning to create a water monopoly. Control the water, control the food supply, control the food supply. Control everything, Tom finished. He thought of the Wilsons, the Hendersons, all the families who'd been forced to sell. How long have you known about this? We've suspected for months, but getting evidence has been nearly impossible. Agritech has connections everywhere, local officials, state representatives, even federal agencies. Every time we get close, someone shuts us down or transfers the investigating team. But not you. She smiled slightly. I'm stubborn, and I have a personal stake in this. The farm I grew up on, it was one of the first they acquired, 20 years ago. I didn't understand then what was happening, but I've spent my career tracking their activities. Tom stood up, pacing in the dim light. So what now? You've made contact, but they know you're here, and they definitely know I'm not selling. Now, she said, standing to face him, we fight back. But I need to see your west pasture tonight. If my suspicions are correct, there's evidence there that could blow this whole thing wide open. Tom checked his watch. Emma would be worried by now, but this was bigger than dinner plans. All right, but we go on foot. Less chance of being spotted. They left the vehicles hidden behind the barn and began the 2-mile trek to Tom's property. The moon had risen, full and bright, casting silver light across the drought-stricken landscape. Despite the circumstances, Tom felt a surge of pride as they walked his land. 4 generations of Bradleys had worked this soil, survived droughts and floods, depressions and booms. They wouldn't be the generation that gave up. As they approached the west pasture, Dr. Martinez pulled out a small device from her pocket. It began clicking slowly, then faster as they neared a particular spot. Underground water movement, she explained, but the pattern is all wrong for natural flow. Tom led her to the area he discovered 3 months ago. Even in the moonlight, the difference was visible. While the surrounding earth was cracked and dry, a rough circle about 30 feet in diameter showed signs of moisture. I found it after the last rain, he explained. 3 inches fell, but this spot, it was like it repelled the water at first, then suddenly absorbed it all. Been staying damp ever since, even through the worst of the drought. Dr. Martinez knelt down, running her hands through the soil. This isn't natural. Feel the temperature difference? Tom touched the earth where she indicated. It was noticeably cooler, almost cold. There's something underneath, she said, pulling out a small folding shovel from her pack. We need to dig. For the next hour, they carefully excavated a small hole. About 3 feet down, Tom's shovel hit something solid, metal. They cleared away more dirt, revealing what looked like an access panel with the Agritech logo stamped on it. Document this, Dr. Martinez said urgently, handing Tom her phone. We need evidence before they realize we've found it. As Tom took photos, she continued excavating around the panel. This is it. This is what we've been looking for. It's some kind of control station for their aquifer manipulation system. Suddenly, the night air was split by the sound of engines. Headlights blazed across the pasture as 3 vehicles converged on their location. Tom grabbed Dr. Martinez's arm. We need to go, now. But it was too late. They were surrounded by men in dark suits, all bearing the cold efficiency of corporate security. Dr. Martinez, a voice called out. A tall man stepped into the light, his silver hair and expensive suit marking him as someone in authority. And Mr. Bradley, I'm Victor Kozlov, CEO of Agritech Industries. I believe we need to have a conversation about property rights and national security. Tom stepped forward, putting himself between Kozlov and the exposed panel. This is my land. You're trespassing. Kozlov smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Actually, Mr. Bradley, as of 20 minutes ago, this land belongs to Agritech. You see, while you were playing hide-and-seek with Dr. Martinez here, your son Jake signed over power of attorney and completed the sale. Family pressure can be so effective. The words hit Tom like a physical blow. Jake would never... But then he thought of the strange phone calls his son had been receiving, the worried looks, the insistence that Tom consider selling. What did you threaten him with? Tom's voice was barely controlled rage. Threaten, such an ugly word. We simply explained the legal realities of his situation in Lincoln. Amazing how many city ordinances a restaurant can violate without even knowing it. Kozlov stepped closer. Now, if you'll both come with us, we can discuss this civilized people. Dr. Martinez moved closer to Tom. You can't hide this forever, Kozlov. The federal investigation has been suspended. Kozlov interrupted smoothly. Budget cuts, you understand. And Dr. Martinez, you've been relieved of duty pending a review of your methods, breaking and entering, conspiracy with civilians. Your career is over. Tom felt the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders. 72 years of life, 4 generations of family legacy, and it came down to this moment in a moonlit pasture. But as he looked at the exposed panel, at the evidence of Agritech's manipulation of nature itself, something hardened inside him. You might own the land, he said quietly, but you don't own the truth, and the truth has a way of coming out. Kozlov's smile faltered slightly. Truth is what we make it, Mr. Bradley. Now, his words were cut short by the sudden roar of helicopter rotors. Bright searchlights blazed down from above as not one but 3 helicopters appeared over the tree line. The lead helicopter bore official government markings that even Tom recognized. Federal agents, a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. This is the FBI. Everyone remain where you are. Kozlov's composure finally cracked. This is impossible. I have assurances from the highest levels. Funny thing about those assurances, Dr. Martinez said, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She pulled out what Tom had thought was a phone, but now revealed itself as a sophisticated recording device. I've been transmitting everything to a secure federal server since we found the panel. Every word, every image. And those suspended investigations, that was just to make you feel safe enough to show your hand. She turned to Tom. I'm sorry for the deception, Mr. Bradley. We needed you to lead us here naturally, to make Kozlov believe he was in control. Your son Jake is fine, by the way. He's been working with us for weeks, helping to set this trap. As federal agents rappelled down from the helicopters, Tom felt a mixture of relief and bewilderment. So this whole thing was an operation to expose Agritech once and for all, she confirmed. But your help, your knowledge of the land, that was the key. We couldn't have found this without you. Within minutes, Kozlov and his men were in custody. Agents swarmed over the exposed panel, documenting everything. Dr. Martinez, whose real name was indeed Rachel Martinez, though her actual title was Senior Field Director of the Federal Water Crimes Division, coordinated the operation with practiced efficiency. As dawn broke over Millbrook Valley, Tom stood with Agent David Chen, who had arrived in the lead helicopter. Your country owes you a debt, Mr. Bradley, Chen said formally. Without your cooperation, we might never have uncovered this conspiracy. Tom shook his head. I just did what any farmer would do, protected the land. But I have to ask, how long have you been planning this? Since you first refused Agritech's offer 6 months ago, Chen admitted. You were the anomaly in their pattern, the one farmer who couldn't be bought or intimidated. We knew if anyone could help us crack this case, it would be you. And the drought? Tom asked, looking out over his fields. Already being reversed, Dr. Martinez said, joining them. The system they installed can work both ways. Within a few months, the natural water table should be restored. The farms they bought under duress will be returned to their original owners or their families, with full compensation. Tom thought of the Wilsons, the Hendersons, all the families who had lost everything. They'll get their land back? Every acre, she confirmed, and Agritech's assets will be used to compensate for lost crops and damages. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the valley, Tom felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The helicopter that had brought federal agents would soon carry away the evidence that would bring down a conspiracy. But more than that, it would carry the story of how a humble farmer's simple act of helping a stranger had saved not just his own land, but the agricultural heritage of an entire region. 2 weeks later, Tom stood in his kitchen, looking out at workers removing the underground equipment from his west pasture. Emma stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Jake's coming home this weekend, she said. Says he has something important to tell us. Tom smiled, already knowing what his son would say. The investigation had revealed Jake's crucial role in the operation, how he had pretended to cooperate with Agritech while feeding information to the federal agents. The boy had his grandfather's courage after all. A car pulled up the driveway, and Tom recognized Dr. Martinez's rental. She had traded the Mercedes for something more practical, more fitting, for someone who spent time on farms. "Thought you'd be in Washington by now," Tom said as she approached the porch. "Soon," she replied, "but I wanted to thank you properly and to tell you that the first of the displaced families move back onto their land tomorrow. The Wilsons are having a barn raising on Saturday." Tom nodded approvingly. Communities coming back together, that's how it should be. "There's one more thing," she added, pulling out an official-looking envelope. "The Federal Agricultural Security Division would like to offer you a position as a regional consultant. Your knowledge of the land, your instincts, we could use them." Tom looked at the envelope, then at Emma, who smiled knowingly. "I'm a farmer," he said simply. "Always have been, always will be." "That's exactly why we need you," Dr. Martinez insisted. "You wouldn't have to leave the farm. Just help us understand the land the way you do. Help us protect it." Tom took the envelope, feeling its weight. "I'll think about it," he said, which Emma knew meant yes. As Dr. Martinez drove away, Tom reflected on how a simple act of kindness, helping a lost traveler, had uncovered a conspiracy, saved countless farms, and restored a community. The drought would end, the land would heal, and the Bradleys would continue farming Cedar Ridge for generations to come. But now they would do so with the knowledge that sometimes the smallest actions could have the biggest impact. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, with green shoots emerging from recently moistened soil, Tom Bradley stood in his west pasture as another helicopter landed. This time, it brought news crews to document the full recovery of the region's water table. As reporters interviewed him about his role in exposing Agritech's scheme, Tom's eyes drifted to the horizon where rain clouds were gathering. Real ones, not manufactured by hidden machines. "Mr. Bradley," a young reporter asked, "when you helped that lost traveler 6 months ago, did you have any idea it would lead to all this?" Tom smiled, thinking of his great-grandfather who had first broken sod on this land, of all the Bradleys, who had trusted in the basic principle of helping neighbors in need. "Young lady," he said, "I've learned over 72 years that you never know which moment is going to change everything. So you treat every moment, every person like they matter, because they do." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of natural rain began to fall on Millbrook Valley. The drought was over in more ways than one. The morning after Tom Bradley's encounter with the lost tourist, he woke before dawn, as he had every day for 50 years. The kitchen clock showed 4:30 a.m. when his feet hit the worn floorboards, muscle memory guiding him through the familiar motions of starting coffee and checking the weather report on the old radio. Emma stirred beside him, but didn't wake. After all these years, she could sleep through his early morning routine. Outside, the pre-dawn air carried that peculiar stillness that only farmers and night shift workers ever experience. Tom stepped onto the back porch, coffee mug warming his hands, and surveyed his domain. 1,200 acres of Bradley land stretched before him, though only half remained productive in this third year of drought. The rest lay fallow, preserved for better times that Tom stubbornly believed would come. His thoughts drifted to yesterday's strange encounter. Dr. Rachel Martinez had seemed genuinely grateful for his help, yet something about the entire situation nagged at him. The calluses on her hands, the way she'd photographed his property, that black SUV maintaining perfect following distance, none of it added up to a simple case of a scientist getting lost on country roads. The sound of gravel crunching under tires pulled him from his reverie. Jake's pickup truck rolled into view, earlier than expected. His son usually didn't arrive for morning chores until 6. Tom watched as Jake parked and sat in the cab for a long moment before climbing out, his shoulders tense with something more than physical fatigue. "Coffee's fresh," Tom called out, noting how Jake startled slightly at his voice. "Didn't expect you this early." Jake climbed the porch steps, accepting the mug Tom poured for him. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that call yesterday. "What call?" Tom asked, though he already sensed this connected somehow to his roadside encounter. "From Lincoln. Building inspector says someone filed a complaint about my restaurant. Anonymous tip about supposed code violations." Jake's jaw worked as he spoke. "Been in business 5 years without a single issue, and suddenly I'm looking at potential fines that could shut me down." Tom felt his stomach tighten. "When did this call come?" "About an hour after that Agritech representative left another message on your machine, the one you've been ignoring." Jake met his father's eyes. "Dad, what aren't you telling me? These people have been circling for months, and now suddenly I'm having problems with city officials?" The puzzle pieces were falling into place in Tom's mind, forming a picture he didn't like. "Sit down, son. There's something I need to tell you about yesterday." Over the next half hour, Tom recounted his encounter with Dr. Martinez, the suspicious details he'd noticed, and his decision to help her despite his misgivings. Jake listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "You think she was connected to Agritech?" Jake finally asked. "Can't say for certain, but the timing of your troubles, that's no coincidence." Tom stared into his coffee. "I've been farming this land long enough to know when someone's trying to herd me toward a particular gate." Jake stood abruptly, pacing the length of the porch. "We should have sold months ago when they first offered, before they started playing these games. Bradleys don't sell." The words came automatically, carved into Tom's identity like commandments in stone. "Bradleys don't lose everything to corporate bullies either," Jake shot back. "What happens when they come after the farm directly, when they find some environmental violation or zoning issue? You've seen what they did to the Wilsons." Tom had indeed seen. Frank Wilson's century-old farm had been cited for groundwater contamination that mysteriously appeared right after he refused Agritech's third offer. The legal battles had drained Frank's savings until selling became his only option. "Your grandfather faced worse than this," Tom said quietly. "During the farm crisis of the 80s, when the banks were foreclosing left and right, he held on. Different times, Dad. Grandpa was fighting banks playing by known rules. These people," around Jake gestured helplessly, "they're playing a different game entirely." The sun was fully up now, painting the drought-stricken fields in harsh morning light. Tom could see every crack in the earth, every struggling plant fighting for survival. But he could also see 4 generations of Bradley's sweat soaked into that soil, decades of dreams planted alongside the crops. "I need to check the west pasture," Tom announced, setting down his mug. "Been meaning to look at something out there?" Jake recognized the deflection but didn't push. "Want company? Best if I go alone. You've got your own business to worry about." They both knew Tom was retreating into farm work to avoid the harder conversation, but some Bradley traits ran too deep to challenge. Jake headed back to his truck, pausing at the driver's door. "Dad, whatever's going on, whatever you're not telling me about that woman yesterday, just remember you're not in this alone." Tom nodded, throat tight. He watched his son drive away, then headed for the equipment shed. The old Gator utility vehicle started on the second try, and soon he was bouncing across the rutted paths that crisscrossed his property. The west pasture lay furthest from the house, bordered by the abandoned creek bed that hadn't seen water in 20 years. It was here, 3 months ago, that Tom had discovered something he still couldn't explain. After a brief rain shower, The last real precipitation they'd seen, he'd noticed an area where the water behaved strangely. Instead of soaking into the parched earth immediately, the rain had seemed to pool and swirl before suddenly disappearing all at once, as if sucked down by some underground force. Since then, that particular spot had remained inexplicably moist, while everything around it cracked and dried. Tom had told no one about this anomaly, not even Emma. Some instinct had warned him to keep it quiet. The same instinct now screaming that yesterday's events were connected to this secret. He parked the gator and approached the spot on foot. Even in the morning heat, the temperature dropped noticeably as he neared the affected area. The soil here was dark with moisture, almost muddy, while dust devils swirled in the bone-dry fields beyond. Kneeling, Tom pressed his hand into the earth. It was definitely cooler and something else, a faint vibration, almost like machinery running far below. He'd felt it before, but convinced himself it was imagination. Now, with everything that had happened, he wasn't so sure. Finding anything interesting? Tom spun around, heart hammering. Dr. Martinez stood 20 feet away, having approached. With unnerving silence, she wore practical clothes this time. Jeans, work boots, a faded denim shirt. The nervous tourist act had been completely abandoned. "This is private property," Tom said, standing slowly. "How did you even get here?" "I apologize for the intrusion," she replied, not answering his question. "But after yesterday, I felt we needed to speak more directly. Seems to me we spoke plenty. I helped you find your way, end of story." Dr. Martinez smiled slightly. "We both know that's not the end of anything, Mr. Bradley. You've noticed things about your land, things that don't make sense. The moisture anomaly, for instance." Tom's expression must have confirmed her guess because she continued, "It's not natural what's happening here. And it's not coincidence that Agritech wants your property so desperately. Lady, I don't know who you really are or what game you're playing, but I'm exactly who I said I am," she interrupted, "a hydrologist with the Federal Agricultural Security Division. What I didn't mention is that we've been investigating Agritech's land acquisitions across 6 states. Your farm sits on a geological formation that's crucial to their plans." Despite himself, Tom was curious. "What plans? Have you heard of aquifer manipulation? Artificial drought creation?" She stepped closer, pulling out a tablet device. "Look at this." The screen showed a map of the Midwest, with various points highlighted in red. Tom recognized many of them as farms that had been sold to Agritech over the past 2 years. His own property was marked in yellow. Each red point represents a farm with specific geological characteristics, Dr. Martinez explained. Underground water channels, particular rock formations, natural electromagnetic properties. Alone, they're just interesting quirks of geography. Together, they form a network. "A network for what?" Tom asked, despite his better judgment. "We believe Agritech has developed technology to control water flow through deep aquifer systems, create drought in some areas, abundance in others. Your farm is the keystone, the central point that would give them control over water distribution across the entire region." Tom stared at the map, his mind rebelling against the implications. That's insane. You're talking about playing God with the weather. Not weather, water, much more controllable and infinitely more valuable. She gestured toward the moist patch of earth. "This anomaly, it's a test. Someone has already begun implementing their system here, probably to verify their calculations. And you expect me to believe the government just happened to figure this out?" "No," she admitted. "We were tipped off by someone inside Agritech, a scientist who developed the technology but realized too late how it would be used." Tom backed away, shaking his head. "This is too much. Corporate conspiracies, underground water control, federal investigations. I'm just a farmer trying to keep my land. Which is exactly why they targeted you, Dr. Martinez pressed. The Bradleys have held this land for 4 generations. You're respected in the community. If you sell, others will follow. Your resistance is the only thing slowing their timeline. Timeline for what? Complete corporate control of Midwest water resources. Imagine being able to decide which farms succeed and which fail, which towns thrive and which wither, which food grows and which doesn't. It's not about profit, Mr. Bradley. It's about power. Tom thought of the Wilsons, the Hendersons, all the families forced to sell, the mysterious contaminations, the sudden regulatory problems, the financial pressures that appeared from nowhere. If what Dr. Martinez was saying was true, prove it, he said suddenly. You say there's something unnatural here. Prove it. Dr. Martinez smiled, reaching into her bag. I was hoping you'd ask. She pulled out what looked like a sophisticated metal detector. Ground-penetrating radar. Let's see what's really under this anomaly. For the next hour, they worked together mapping the underground area. The device revealed a network of metal objects approximately 12 feet below the surface, arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Tom's skepticism crumbled with each new reading. They're resonators, Dr. Martinez explained, devices that can influence water movement through subtle vibrations. Whoever installed these has access to your property. Nobody's been on my land without permission, Tom insisted. But even as he spoke, he remembered the survey crew that had worked the adjacent property 6 months ago. They could easily have crossed the boundary line. Mr. Bradley, Tom, I know this is a lot to process, but we need your help. We can't move against Agritech without solid evidence, and that evidence is on your land. What exactly are you asking? Permission to conduct a full investigation, bring in a team, excavate these devices, document everything. With your cooperation, we can expose this entire operation. Tom looked out over his fields, thinking of Jake's troubles in Lincoln, the pressure that would only increase if he continued to resist. But he also thought of his father, his grandfather, and the legacy they'd entrusted to him. If I agree, he said slowly, what guarantees do I have? That you're really who you say you are? That this isn't just another way to force me off my land? Dr. Martinez reached into her jacket and pulled out a satellite phone. Call this number. Ask for Deputy Director Harrison at the Department of Agriculture. He'll confirm everything. I've told you. Tom took the phone, weighing it in his hand like it might explode. And if I say no, then we respect your decision and find another way. But Tom, they won't stop. Your son's problems are just the beginning. These people have resources and connections you can't imagine. The only way to beat them is to expose them. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the drought-ravaged landscape. Tom thought of the farms already lost, the communities torn apart, the corporate machinery grinding inexorably forward. He thought of Jake trying to build something of his own, now threatened by forces beyond his control. I need time to think, he said finally, and I need to talk to my family. Dr. Martinez nodded. Of course, but time is one thing we don't have much of. Agritech is moving faster now, getting desperate. Your neighbor, Pete Wilson, received a new offer yesterday, double what they paid his brother Frank. Pete's land borders mine to the south, Tom realized aloud. Exactly. They're tightening the noose. Once they have the surrounding properties, the pressure on you will become unbearable. She handed him a business card, a real one this time, with official government seals. Call me when you decide, but please don't wait too long. After she left, Tom stood alone in the west pasture, staring at the ground beneath his feet. Somewhere down there, if Dr. Martinez was telling the truth, lay evidence of a conspiracy that threatened everything he held dear. The morning chores still needed doing, The cows needed feeding, and life on the farm had to continue. But Tom knew something fundamental had shifted. He climbed back on the gator and headed home, the satellite phone heavy in his pocket. Emma would be wondering where he was, and he had no idea how to explain any of this to her. How do you tell your wife of 48 years that your stubbornness might have accidentally uncovered a corporate conspiracy to control the region's water supply? As he drove, Tom noticed dust rising from the county road, another vehicle approaching his property. These days, unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. He changed course, intercepting the car at the main gate. Sheriff Bill Henderson stepped out of his cruiser, his expression apologetic. "Morning, Tom. Hate to bother you, but I've got some papers to serve." "What kind of papers?" Tom asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Complaint from the county. Seems there's been a report about unauthorized excavation on your property. Environmental protection issue, they're saying." Bill handed over the official-looking documents. "You've got 30 days to respond before they start fining you." Tom didn't need to ask who had filed the report. Unauthorized excavation. "Bill, I haven't dug anything deeper than a post hole in 5 years." "I know, Tom, I know." The sheriff's weathered face showed genuine regret. "But I've got to follow procedure. Between you and me, something's not right about how fast this came through the system. Usually takes weeks for environmental complaints to process. This appeared on my desk this morning, already approved by every department." "They're turning up the pressure," Tom muttered. "What's that?" "Nothing, Bill, just thinking out loud." Tom folded the papers, adding them to his growing collection of problems. "I appreciate you bringing these yourself instead of sending a deputy. Least I could do. Your daddy helped me get this job 30 years ago." Bill hesitated, then added quietly, "Tom, I've been sheriff long enough to know when big money starts pushing people around. If you need anything, officially or otherwise, you let me know." After Bill left, Tom sat in the gator for a long time, engine idling. The environmental complaint was no coincidence. It had to be connected to his morning activities with Dr. Martinez, which meant someone was watching his land, reporting his movements in real time. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Despite the rising heat, he scanned the horizon, looking for observers, cameras, anything out of place. The familiar landscape suddenly felt foreign, hostile. When he finally returned to the house, Emma was in the garden, harvesting what few vegetables had survived the drought. She straightened as he approached, reading his expression instantly. "What's wrong?" she asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk," Tom said. "All of us. Call Jake, tell him to come for lunch, and Emma, you might want to sit down for this." 2 hours later, the Bradley family sat around the kitchen table, the remains of lunch pushed aside to make room for maps, documents, and the satellite phone Dr. Martinez had given Tom. He had laid out everything: the strange encounter, the moisture anomaly, the underground devices, the federal investigation, and the morning's environmental complaint. Emma listened with characteristic calm, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed she'd been paying more attention to the situation than Tom had realized. Jake's reactions ranged from disbelief to anger to a grudging acceptance that his father had stumbled onto something significant. "So what do we do?" Jake asked finally. "If half of what this woman says is true, we're in way over our heads." We could sell," Emma said quietly. "Take their money and walk away. Let someone else fight this battle." Tom looked at his wife in surprise. In 48 years, he'd never heard her suggest giving up on anything. "I'm not saying we should," she clarified, reading his expression. "I'm saying we need to consider all options. If these people are as powerful as Dr. Martinez claims, we could lose everything anyway. The farm, Jake's restaurant, maybe more. Or we could fight," Jake countered, surprising Tom with his vehemence. "If what they're doing is illegal, if there's really a federal investigation, then helping expose them might be our best protection." Fighting means risk, Emma pointed out, to all of us. Not fighting means certainty, Tom said. Certain that they'll keep pressuring us until we break. Certain that whatever they're planning will go forward. Certain that other families will go through what the Wilsons did. The kitchen fell silent as each family member grappled with the implications. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the parched fields, a visible reminder of what was at stake. There's something else, Tom admitted. Something I haven't told anyone. He described his first discovery of the moisture anomaly 3 months ago, how he'd kept it secret out of an instinct he couldn't explain. I think part of me knew even then that something wasn't right, that this drought wasn't entirely natural. You think they've been testing their system for months? Jake asked. Maybe longer. Who knows how many tests they've run, how much data they've collected. Our farm could be providing them with crucial information, even as we speak. Emma reached across the table and took Tom's hand. So the question is, do we trust this Dr. Martinez? Do we believe her story enough to risk everything? I called. The number she gave me, Tom revealed. Spoke to Deputy Director Harrison myself. He confirmed her identity, said she's one of their best field investigators. Wouldn't give details about the operation, but he seemed genuinely concerned when I mentioned Agritech's interest in our land. So, she's legitimate, Jake mused, but that doesn't mean her plan will work. These corporate types have lawyers, politicians, connections we can't match. They also have weaknesses, Tom countered. They're operating in secret, depending on people not connecting the dots. Once their plan is exposed, once people understand what they're trying to do, they'll deny everything, Emma finished. Claim it's all coincidence, that we're conspiracy theorists trying to stop legitimate development. Not if we have physical evidence, Tom said. Those devices under our west pasture, if they're really there, if we can document them, show how they work. Then we have something concrete, Jake agreed. Something they can't explain away. The family continued debating for another hour, weighing risks against responsibilities, fear against principle. In the end, it was Emma who summarized their situation with characteristic clarity. Seems to me we have 3 choices, she said. We can sell now, take what they're offering, and hope they leave Jake's business alone. We can refuse to sell, but also refuse to help the investigation, basically maintaining the status quo until they find another way to force us out. Or we can fight, help Dr. Martinez, expose whatever's happening, and accept whatever consequences come. There's a 4th option, Jake added. We could go public ourselves, skip the federal investigation, call the media, make enough noise that they can't move against us without drawing attention. Tom shook his head. Without proof, we'd just sound like cranks, and it might spook them into accelerating their timeline, whatever that is. The afternoon shadows were lengthening when they finally reached a consensus. They would cooperate with Dr. Martinez, but on their terms. The investigation would need to be conducted carefully, with safeguards to protect the family if things went wrong, and they would document everything themselves, creating their own record of events. Tom picked up the satellite phone to call Dr. Martinez, then hesitated. Once I make this call, there's no going back. Everyone understands that? Emma squeezed his hand. Jake nodded firmly. 3 generations of Bradleys united in a decision that would change everything. Tom dialed the number, his finger steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to set in motion. As the phone rang, he looked out the window at the land his family had worked for over a century. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as Bradleys always had. Dr. Martinez, he said when she answered. This is Tom Bradley. We need to talk about next steps. The conversation was brief but significant. Dr. Martinez would return tomorrow with a small team, just 3 specialists who could work quickly and quietly, they would excavate one of the devices, document its purpose, and develop a plan for exposing Agritech's operation without putting the Bradley family at unnecessary risk. After hanging up, Tom felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. The decision was made, the course set. For better or worse, the Bradley family was now part of something much larger than a simple land dispute. "I need to check the livestock," Tom announced, needing the familiar routine of farm chores to ground himself. "I'll help," Jake offered. "Been too long since I've gotten my hands dirty around here." Father and son worked side by side as the sun sank toward the horizon, feeding cattle, checking water troughs, and repairing a section of fence damaged by the drought-hardened soil. It was the kind of work that had bound generations of Bradleys to this land, the daily rhythms that corporate schemes and federal investigations couldn't change. "Dad," Jake said as they finished up, "whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm proud of you, for standing up to them, for doing what's right." Tom's throat tightened. "Just trying to be the man your grandfather raised me to be." "You are," Jake assured him, "and more." They walked back to the house as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Emma had the porch light on, a beacon guiding them home. Tomorrow would bring federal agents, excavation equipment, and the beginning of what might be the biggest fight of their lives. But tonight, the Bradley family was together, united in purpose and strengthened by the bonds that had sustained them through 4 generations of challenges. Whatever Agritech had planned, whatever powers they could bring to bear, they would find the Bradleys were not easily moved. Tom paused at the porch steps, looking back at his land one more time. In the growing darkness, he could almost feel the presence of his ancestors, men and women who had faced their own trials and emerged stronger. He drew strength from their memory, from the knowledge that this land had survived droughts, depressions, and countless other challenges. "Coming, dear?" Emma called from the doorway. "Coming," Tom replied, climbing the steps to join his family. Tomorrow would take care of itself. Tonight, they were together, and that was enough. As he closed the door behind him, Tom didn't notice the small drone hovering just beyond the tree line, its camera capturing every movement around the Bradley farmhouse. Nor did he see the black SUV parked on a distant hill, its occupants noting the arrival and departure of every vehicle. The game was about to change, and forces far more powerful than Tom Bradley could imagine were already moving to protect their interests. The simple farmer who had helped a lost traveler was about to discover just how high the stakes really were. The first light of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and orange as Tom Bradley stood on his back porch, coffee cup in hand, watching for the arrival of Dr. Martinez and her team. He hadn't slept well, his mind churning with possibilities and concerns about what the day might bring. Emma had risen with him, as she had every morning of their marriage, and now stood at the kitchen window, kneading bread dough with practiced efficiency. "They're here," Emma called softly, spotting the convoy before Tom did. 3 vehicles approached down the long driveway, Dr. Martinez's practical sedan leading 2 unmarked vans with government plates. Tom set down his coffee and walked to meet them, his boots leaving prints in the dust that hadn't seen rain in months. Dr. Martinez stepped out first, dressed for fieldwork in khaki pants and a light blue shirt with rolled sleeves. She offered Tom a professional smile that held genuine warmth. "Mr. Bradley, thank you for agreeing to this. I know it wasn't an easy decision. Made easier by the environmental complaint that showed up yesterday," Tom replied, shaking her extended hand. "Seems your timing was good. Or theirs was predictably aggressive," she countered. "May I introduce my team?" The van doors opened and 3 specialists emerged with equipment cases. Dr. James Morton, a geophysicist with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, stepped forward first. "Mr. Bradley, it's an honor. I've studied geological surveys of this region for years. Your property sits on some of the most interesting substrata in the Midwest. Next came Dr. Sarah Chen, a hydrologist who looked barely old enough to have earned her doctorate. Her youthful appearance belied sharp expertise as she immediately began analyzing the visible effects of drought on the surrounding landscape. "The soil composition variations are remarkable," she murmured, crouching to examine a handful of earth. The third specialist, Marcus Rivera, was introduced as a technology expert specializing in environmental monitoring systems. His keen gaze swept the property, noting angles and positions with military precision. "We'll need to establish a security perimeter," he said quietly to Dr. Martinez. "If they're watching, they'll react once we start digging." "Already in place," Dr. Martinez assured him. "We have teams positioned at strategic points around the property. Nothing obvious, but enough to give us warning if anyone approaches." Tom felt a chill, despite the warming morning air. The casual mention of security teams drove home the seriousness of what they were undertaking. This wasn't just scientific research, it was an investigation that powerful people wanted stopped. Emma appeared on the porch with a tray of fresh coffee and warm muffins. "Thought you might need some fuel for your work," she called out. The gesture broke the tension, reminding everyone that beneath the conspiracy and technology, this was still a family farm with generations of hospitality bred into its soil. As the team gathered their equipment, Jake's truck appeared on the horizon. He'd closed his restaurant for the day, unwilling to miss whatever revelations might emerge from their west pasture. The building inspector's surprise visit to his establishment yesterday had only strengthened his resolve to see this through. "Where do we start?" Tom asked once everyone had assembled. Dr. Morton pulled out a tablet displaying ground-penetrating radar images. "Based on yesterday's preliminary scans, the most accessible device is here." He pointed to a spot about 30 yards from where Tom had first noticed the moisture anomaly. "We'll excavate carefully, documenting everything as we go." The next several hours passed in a blur of methodical activity. The team established a grid pattern, marked locations with small flags, and began the delicate process of excavation. Tom watched, fascinated, as layers of soil were carefully removed and sifted. Jake documented everything with his phone, creating their own record as agreed. Around mid-morning, Dr. Chen's excited voice cut through the rhythmic sounds of digging. "I've got something." Everyone gathered around the shallow pit where she knelt. Partially exposed in the earth was a metallic cylinder about the size of a thermos connected to thin cables that disappeared deeper into the ground. The device hummed with barely audible vibration. "Careful," Marcus warned as Dr. Chen began to expose more of the object. "These things might have anti-tampering measures." "What exactly is it?" Jake asked, leaning in for a better view. Dr. Morton adjusted his glasses, studying the device intently. "It appears to be a harmonic resonator. See these markings? They indicate frequency ranges well below human hearing. This thing is designed to create subsonic vibrations that could affect water movement through soil and rock." "In English, please," Tom requested. "Imagine dropping a pebble in a pond," Dr. Chen explained. "The ripples spread out, affecting the entire surface. This device does something similar, but underground, creating waves that can guide water flow in specific directions." "And someone planted these on my property without permission," Tom said flatly. "Multiple someones," Marcus corrected, pointing to serial numbers on the device. "This level of sophistication requires significant resources. We're talking military grade. Technology adapted for civilian purposes." Dr. Martinez stepped away to make a phone call, her expression grave. Tom caught fragments of her conversation. "Confirmed presence. Proceed with extraction. Alerting legal team." Nay, when she returned, her professional mask had slipped slightly, revealing underlying concern. We need to work faster, she announced. Our counterparts in Washington are tracking unusual activity at Agritech headquarters. Large fund transfers, emergency board meetings. They know we're here. The team's pace intensified. By early afternoon, they had fully excavated the first device and located two more. Each was photographed, scanned, and carefully disconnected from its power source before being sealed in specialized containers. Tom, Dr. Martinez called him aside while the others worked. I need to be completely honest with you about what we're finding. I appreciate honesty, Tom replied, though her tone made him brace for bad news. These devices are more advanced than we anticipated. The level of coordination required to install and operate them suggests infiltration at multiple levels: local government, utility companies, possibly even law enforcement. Tom thought of Sheriff Henderson's apologetic expression when delivering the environmental complaint. Bill Henderson's a good man. I've known him 30 years. I'm not suggesting he's involved willingly, but someone in his office fast-tracked that complaint. Someone with access to official channels and the ability to manipulate them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. What I'm saying is, we can't be certain who to trust outside this immediate group. The implications settled heavily on Tom's shoulders. In rural communities like Millbrook Valley, trust was the foundation of everything. The thought that his neighbors, friends, or local officials might be compromised by Agritech's influence felt like a betrayal of the basic social contract. There's something else, Dr. Martinez continued. We've detected similar installations on other properties, but none as extensive as yours. Your farm isn't just part of their network, it's the central hub. Everything they're doing revolves around controlling this specific location. Why? Tom asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Look at this. She pulled out her tablet, displaying a topographical map overlaid with geological data. Your property sits at the convergence of three major aquifer systems. The natural rock formations create a kind of funnel effect. Control the water here, and you influence agricultural conditions across 6 states. Tom studied the map, tracing the blue lines that represented underground water channels. His farm, marked with a red star, sat at the center like a spider in a web. So whoever controls this land controls the future of agriculture in the American heartland, Dr. Martinez finished. Imagine being able to create drought conditions in one region while ensuring abundant water in another. You could bankrupt traditional farmers while guaranteeing success for corporate agricultural operations. The scope of the plan staggered Tom. This wasn't just about acquiring land or expanding corporate holdings. This was about fundamentally restructuring American agriculture, deciding who succeeded and who failed based on access to water. A shout from the excavation site interrupted their conversation. Jake was waving urgently, his expression a mixture of excitement and alarm. "Dad, you need to see this!" They hurried over to find the team clustered around a newly exposed device, larger than the others and obviously more complex. Unlike the simple cylinders they'd found earlier, this apparatus featured multiple components, digital displays, and what appeared to be a satellite communication array. "This is the control unit," Marcus explained, his voice tight with discovery. "It's receiving and transmitting data. The whole system is active, has been for months based on these readings." Dr. Morton was frantically taking notes. "Look at these timestamps. They've been conducting tests, gradually increasing power levels. The drought pattern we've been experiencing, it's not entirely natural. They've been exacerbating it, using your land as ground zero for their experiments." Tom felt his knees weaken slightly. The morning he'd discovered the moisture anomaly, the strange behavior of water in his field, it had all been part of a calculated test. His land, His heritage had been turned into a laboratory without his knowledge or consent. "Can we shut it down?" Jake asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Marcus shook his head. "Not without risking exposure of our investigation. If we interrupt their data stream, they'll know we've found it. Right now, our advantage is that they don't know how much we've discovered. So, we leave it running." Tom's voice carried decades of suppressed anger. "Let them continue their experiments on my land?" "For now," Dr. Martinez confirmed, "but not for long. We're building a case, Mr. Bradley. Every device we document, every piece of data we collect, brings us closer to shutting down their entire operation." The sound of an approaching vehicle cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see a black SUV rolling up the driveway, identical to the one that had followed Dr. Martinez 2 days ago. Tom's hand instinctively went to the cell phone in his pocket, ready to call for help. "Stand down," Dr. Martinez said calmly. "That's one of ours." The SUV parked, and Agent David Chen emerged, no relation to Dr. Sarah Chen, as he quickly clarified. His FBI credentials gleamed in the afternoon sun as he approached the group. "We've got a situation," he announced without preamble. "Agritech just filed an emergency injunction to halt all activities on this property. They're claiming the environmental complaint gives them standing to prevent further damage to the land." "On what grounds?" Dr. Martinez demanded. "They're asserting that Mr. Bradley's failure to address the original complaint constitutes negligence, and that our presence here represents unauthorized excavation that could contaminate groundwater." Agent Chen's expression made clear what he thought of these claims. Tom laughed bitterly. "So they create a false complaint, then use it to stop us from investigating their illegal activities? That's rich." "It gets worse," Agent Chen continued. "The injunction hearing is set for tomorrow morning. If the judge rules in their favor, we'll have to cease all operations immediately." Dr. Martinez pulled out her phone. "I need to call Washington. We'll have our legal team there, but Mr. Bradley, you should contact your own attorney as well." Tom thought of Jim Patterson, who'd handled the family's legal matters for decades. Jim was competent, but had never faced anything like this. "I'm not sure our local lawyer is equipped for this kind of fight." "We'll provide support," Dr. Martinez assured him, "but it needs to be your attorney of record to maintain the appearance that this is primarily a property rights issue, not a federal investigation." As she stepped away to make her calls, Tom surveyed the scene around him. Federal agents, scientists, and his own family working together to expose a conspiracy that threatened the foundation of American agriculture. 24 hours ago, he'd been a simple farmer, worried about drought and corporate pressure. Now he stood at the center of something that could reshape the future of farming across the nation. "Dad," Jake said quietly, moving to stand beside him. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we're doing the right thing." Tom nodded, drawing strength from his son's presence. "Your grandfather used to say that the land doesn't really belong to us. We're just caretakers, holding it in trust for future generations. If we don't fight this, what kind of future are we leaving?" Emma joined them, having spent the morning coordinating with the security teams and keeping watch for any suspicious activity. "The Wilsons just called," she reported. "They've seen increased activity at the old Johnson place, the property Agritech bought last month. Construction vehicles, lots of them." "They're accelerating their timeline," Dr. Morton observed, overhearing the conversation. "If they suspect we're onto them, they might try to activate their full system before we can stop them." The implications sent a chill through the group. If Agritech succeeded in bringing their water manipulation network online, the damage could be irreversible. Entire farming communities could be destroyed before legal challenges worked their way through the courts. Dr. Martinez returned, her expression grim but determined. "The deputy director is mobilizing additional resources. We'll Have a full legal team at the hearing tomorrow, plus technical experts to testify about what we've found. But Tom, I need to prepare you for something. More bad news? Agritech will likely attempt to discredit you personally. They'll bring up any financial difficulties, question your mental state, maybe even suggest you're fabricating evidence. And for attention or monetary gain, their strategy will be to make this about you, not about their illegal activities. Tom straightened his shoulders. Let them try. I've lived in this community my whole life. People know who I am, what I stand for. That's exactly what we're counting on, she replied. Your reputation is one of our strongest assets. But be prepared for them to throw everything they have at you. The rest of the afternoon passed in a flurry of documentation and preparation. The team carefully photographed and catalogued each piece of evidence, creating multiple backup copies. Of all data, the excavated devices were sealed in evidence containers, ready for transport to federal laboratories. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the drought-stricken fields in shades of gold and amber, the magnitude of what they faced became increasingly clear. This wasn't just about one family farm or even one corporate scheme. It was about the fundamental question of who controlled the resources that sustained life itself. We should call it a day, Dr. Martinez announced as shadows lengthened across the pasture. Everyone needs rest before tomorrow's hearing. But Tom noticed the security teams weren't packing up. If anything, their vigilance had increased as darkness approached. Agent Chen caught his questioning look. We'll maintain a presence overnight, he explained. There's too much at stake to leave the evidence unguarded. As the science team loaded their equipment, Dr. Morton approached Tom with something in his hand. I wanted you to see this, he said, producing a small vial of soil. This is from directly beneath the control unit. Notice anything unusual? Tom held the vial up to the fading light. The soil had an odd crystalline quality, almost iridescent. Never seen anything like it. Neither have we. Preliminary analysis suggests the soil structure has been fundamentally altered at the molecular level. Whatever they're doing here, it's changing the very nature of the Earth itself. The words hung heavy in the evening air. Tom looked out over his fields, land that had nourished his family for 4 generations, and wondered what other changes lay hidden beneath the surface. How long had these experiments been running? What long-term effects might they have on the soil's ability to support life? Mr. Bradley, Dr. Martinez said as she prepared to leave, I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, you've already done something extraordinary. You stood up when others would have sold out. You trusted your instincts when logic said to take the money and run. Because of that, we have a chance to stop this. Tom nodded, unable to find words adequate to the moment. As the convoy prepared to depart, he felt Emma's hand slip into his, her presence a steady comfort in the gathering. Darkness. Jake's staying for dinner, she said softly. Thought we could all use a good meal and some family time before tomorrow. That sounds perfect, Tom replied, grateful for her ability to find normalcy in the midst of chaos. As they walked back to the house, Tom paused to look once more at the west pasture. In the distance, he could see the subtle glow of equipment, where federal agents maintained their vigil. The battle lines had been drawn, and tomorrow would bring the first major confrontation. But tonight, the Bradley family would gather around their kitchen table as they had for generations, drawing strength from their bond and their connection to this land. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their determination to protect not just their farm, but the future of American agriculture itself. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky as Tom climbed the porch steps. Somewhere out there, in corporate boardrooms and government offices, plans were being made and strategies devised. But here, in this old farmhouse, simpler truths prevailed. The value of family, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the sacred duty of protecting the land for future generations. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and judges, technical, testimony and legal maneuvering, but tonight belonged to the Bradleys, and that was enough. As Tom closed the door behind him, shutting out the world's complications, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. His father and grandfather would have approved of the stand he was taking. In the end, that mattered more than any corporate scheme or government investigation. The sweet aroma of Emma's pot roast filled the kitchen, a reminder that some things remained constant even as the world shifted around them. Jake was already at the table, scrolling through the day's photos on his phone, creating a detailed record of everything they'd discovered. "Put that away for now," Emma gently scolded. "Dinner's almost ready, and we need to talk about tomorrow." As the family gathered around the worn oak table, Tom felt a surge of gratitude for these people who stood with him. The fight ahead would be difficult, perhaps the hardest thing any of them had ever faced. But they would face it as they faced everything together with courage and conviction. Outside, night settled fully over Millbrook Valley. In the West Pasture, federal agents maintained their watch over evidence that could change everything. In distant cities, powerful people made plans to protect their interests. But in the Bradley farmhouse, 3 generations shared a meal and strengthened the bonds that would see them through whatever tomorrow might bring. The old house creaked and settled around them, its timbers holding the memories of all the Bradleys who had faced their own trials within these walls. Each generation had its battles, its moments of truth. Now it was Tom's turn to stand firm, to protect what mattered most, to ensure that the land would sustain life for generations to come. As Emma served dessert, apple pie made with fruit from their own orchard, Tom raised his coffee cup in an impromptu toast. "To family," he said simply, "and to doing what's right, no matter the cost." "To family," Jake and Emma echoed, their voices carrying the weight of shared commitment. In the morning, they would enter a courtroom to fight for their future, but tonight, they had each other, and that was the greatest strength of all. The Bradley family had weathered storms before, had survived droughts and depressions, wars and economic upheavals. This challenge, though different in nature, would be met with the same determination that had carried them through 4 generations on this land. As the evening wore on, plans were made, contingencies discussed, and courage gathered for the battle ahead. But underlying it all was the simple truth that had guided the Bradleys since the beginning. The land was more than property, more than an asset to be bought and sold. It was a trust, a responsibility, a living connection between past and future. Tomorrow, that truth would be tested in ways none of them could fully anticipate. But tonight, in the warm glow of the kitchen light, surrounded by family and fortified by love, Tom Bradley knew they were ready for whatever came next. The land had sustained them for generations. Now it was their turn to protect it, no matter the cost. The Westfield County Courthouse stood imposingly in the morning light, its stone facade weathered by decades of prairie winds and changing seasons. Tom Bradley straightened his tie, the same one he'd worn to his father's funeral 15 years earlier, and took a deep breath. Emma gave his hand a reassuring squeeze as they walked up the granite steps, Jake following close behind. Federal agents flanked them discreetly, their presence a reminder of just how high the stakes had become. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with activity. News of the emergency injunction hearing had spread quickly through Millbrook Valley, drawing curious onlookers and concerned neighbors. Tom nodded to Pete Wilson, whose farm bordered his to the south. Pete's gaze was sympathetic but cautious, a man caught between loyalty to an old friend and fear of powerful enemies. "Quite the turnout," whispered Jim Patterson, the Bradley family attorney. Despite his earlier misgivings, Jim had spent the night preparing, bolstered by resources provided by Dr. Martinez's federal colleagues. Judge Harriet Collins is presiding. She's tough but fair, been on the bench 30 years. If anyone can see through corporate manipulation, it's her. At the plaintiff's table sat a team of impeccably dressed attorneys, their laptop computers and leather portfolios arranged with military precision. Leading them was Howard Banks, Agritech's chief legal counsel, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was matched only by his astronomical hourly rate. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Collins entered. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. She surveyed the crowded courtroom with the air of someone who had seen every human drama play out before her bench and remained unimpressed by all of them. "Be seated," she commanded, her voice carrying easily without the need for amplification. "We're here on an emergency injunction request in the matter of Agritech Industries versus Bradley. Given the nature of this hearing, I'm limiting each side to 30 minutes of presentation. Mr. Banks, you may begin." Howard Banks rose smoothly, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. "Thank you, Your Honor. Agritech Industries comes before this court seeking immediate protection of vital environmental resources beneath the Bradley property. Yesterday, unauthorized excavation activities were observed that threaten the stability of natural aquifer systems supporting agriculture throughout the region." Tom felt his blood pressure rising as Banks continued, spinning a tale of environmental negligence and regulatory violations that bore no resemblance to reality. According to Agritech's version, the Bradley farm was the site of reckless digging that could contaminate groundwater and disrupt water flow to neighboring properties. "Furthermore," Banks continued, "we have reason to believe these activities are being conducted with improper equipment and without required permits. The potential damage to the regional water table could be catastrophic and irreversible." Judge Collins interrupted. "Mr. Banks, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence supporting your claims beyond the initial environmental complaint?" "Indeed, Your Honor." Banks gestured, and an assistant brought forward a folder of documents. "We've submitted affidavits from environmental experts detailing the potential damage. Additionally, satellite imagery shows unusual ground disturbances consistent with unauthorized excavation." Tom leaned toward Dr. Martinez, who sat directly behind him. "Those images would show their own equipment being installed," he whispered incredulously. "Exactly," she replied softly. "They're using evidence of their own illegal activity to shut down our investigation." Banks concluded his presentation with a flourish of technical jargon and dire predictions. "Your Honor, we're simply asking that all excavation activities cease immediately until proper environmental impact studies can be conducted. Agritech stands ready to fund these studies as a demonstration of our commitment to responsible land management." Judge Collins turned to the defense table. "Mr. Patterson, your response." Jim Patterson stood, his modest suit a stark contrast to Banks's tailored perfection. "Your Honor, the Bradley family has maintained this land for 4 generations without a single environmental violation. The current activities on their property are neither unauthorized nor harmful. In fact, they are part of a legitimate investigation into suspicious devices found buried on Bradley land without the owner's knowledge or consent." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Collins raised an eyebrow. "Devices? What devices are we talking about, Counselor?" "With the court's permission," Patterson replied, "I'd like to call Dr. Rachel Martinez to explain the nature of these devices and their potential impact." Banks was on his feet immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Dr. Martinez is not an independent expert. She's employed by the federal government and has a clear agenda against corporate agricultural development." "Your Honor," Patterson countered, Dr. Martinez is a recognized authority in hydrology with extensive field experience. Her credentials are impeccable, and her testimony is directly relevant to refuting Agritech's claims. Judge Collins considered for a moment. Objection overruled. I'll hear from Dr. Martinez, though I'll remind all parties that this is an injunction hearing, not a full trial. Dr. Martinez, please approach the stand. Dr. Martinez moved forward confidently, took the oath, and settled into the witness chair. Under Patterson's questioning, she explained her initial contact with Tom Bradley and the subsequent discovery of sophisticated devices buried on his property. These aren't simple monitoring instruments, she testified, displaying photographs on the courtroom's video screen. These are active manipulation devices designed to alter natural water flow through subsurface rock formations. Our analysis indicates they've been operational for at least 6 months, coinciding exactly with the onset of intensified drought conditions in the region. As she spoke, Tom watched the jurors' expressions shift from skepticism to concern. Even Judge Collins leaned forward, her attention fully engaged. "And who manufactured these devices?" Patterson asked. "Each unit bears proprietary technology patented by Teradyne Systems, a wholly owned subsidiary of Agritech Industries," Dr. Martinez replied, her voice steady. "The installation pattern matches land acquisition patterns by Agritech over the past 18 months. Properties purchased by Agritech all contain similar devices, creating what appears to be a networked system for controlling regional water resources." Banks was visibly agitated now, passing urgent notes to his team. When Patterson finished his questioning, the corporate attorney approached the witness stand like a predator circling wounded prey. "Dr. Martinez," he began, his tone condescending, "isn't it true that your federal unit has been under congressional scrutiny for exceeding its mandate and interfering with legitimate business activities?" "Muck, our mandate is to protect critical agricultural resources, including water," she replied evenly. "We follow that mandate regardless of who might be threatening those resources." Banks switched tactics. "You entered Mr. Bradley's property under false pretenses, claiming to be lost. Is deception a standard operating procedure in your investigations?" "Initial contact was made informally to assess the situation without alerting potential violators. Once I identified legitimate concerns, I revealed my identity and obtained Mr. Bradley's full cooperation." For 20 minutes, Banks attempted to undermine Dr. Martinez's credibility and question her motives. She remained composed, answering each accusation with clear, factual responses. Tom found himself admiring her resolve in the face of such aggressive questioning. Finally, Judge Collins intervened. "Mr. Banks, if you have no substantive challenges to the technical evidence presented, perhaps we should move on." Banks retreated, but his expression suggested he was far from finished. Next, Patterson called Tom to the stand. As Tom settled into the witness chair, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This wasn't just about his farm anymore. It was about every family whose livelihood depended on fair access to water. "Mr. Bradley," Patterson began, "how long has your family owned this property?" "4 generations," Tom replied. "My great-grandfather homesteaded the original parcel in 1892. We've added to it over the years, but the west pasture, where these devices were found, has been Bradley land for 133 years." "And when did you first notice unusual activity on your property?" Tom described the moisture anomaly he'd discovered 3 months earlier, his growing concerns, and the increasing pressure from Agritech to sell his land. His testimony was straightforward and unembellished, delivered in the measured tones of a man accustomed to facing harsh realities without complaint. "After finding these devices," Patterson asked, "what was your reaction?" "Anger, mostly," Tom admitted. The thought that someone would trespass on my land, bury machinery without permission, and then use that equipment to manipulate the water that every farmer in the county depends on, it felt like a violation of everything farming stands for. We all face the same weather, the same challenges. Nobody should have the power to decide who gets water and who doesn't. When Banks rose for cross-examination, his approach was immediate and harsh. Mr. Bradley, isn't it true that your farm has been struggling financially for years? That you've taken out multiple loans against your property that you're struggling to repay? Tom's jaw tightened, but he answered honestly. Farming has always been cyclical. We've had good years and lean years. Yes, we have loans. Just like every working farm in America, we've never missed a payment. And wouldn't Agritech's generous offer to purchase your property at 3 times market value solve all those financial concerns? Allow you to retire comfortably, perhaps help your son expand his restaurant business. It might solve financial concerns, Tom acknowledged, but some things matter more than money. My family has been caretakers of this land for over a century. We don't measure its value in dollars. Banks smiled thinly. Very poetic, Mr. Bradley, but isn't the simpler explanation that you fabricated these claims about mysterious devices to drive up Agritech's offer or to seek attention for your failing farm? Objection! Patterson was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness and making accusations without foundation. Sustained, Judge Collins ruled. Mr. Banks, confine your questions to relevant facts, not speculation about motives. As the morning wore on, additional witnesses took the stand. Dr. Morton testified about the geological uniqueness of the Bradley property and the strategic placement of the devices found there. Agent Chen outlined the federal investigation into unusual drought patterns and suspicious land acquisition tactics by Agritech. Throughout it all, Tom noticed Victor Kozlov, Agritech's CEO, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, his expression unreadable. Occasionally, Kozlov would make a note or whisper to an assistant, but otherwise he remained an observer to proceedings that could determine his company's future. During a brief recess, Dr. Martinez approached Tom in the courthouse hallway. You did well, she said quietly, but they're not finished. They've got something else planned. I can feel it. Like what? Tom asked. I don't know, but Banks seems too confident for someone whose case is falling apart. Stay alert. When court resumed, Banks called his final witness. A surprise that sent whispers racing through the courtroom. The plaintiff calls Jake Bradley, Banks announced. Tom felt as though he'd been punched in the stomach. Jake looked equally shocked, rising slowly from his seat beside Emma. As he moved toward the witness stand, he cast a confused glance at his father. After Jake was sworn in, Banks approached with a deceptively friendly smile. Mr. Bradley. The younger Mr. Bradley, you operate a restaurant in Lincoln, correct? Yes, the Harvest Table. We focus on farm-to-table cuisine using local ingredients. A lovely establishment. And I understand you've been having some regulatory issues recently. Building code violations, health department concerns. Jake's expression hardened. Sudden issues that appeared immediately after my father refused Agritech's latest offer. Quite a coincidence. Banks ignored the implication. These problems could be quite costly to address, couldn't they? Potentially even force you to close your business. If they were legitimate concerns, yes, but they're not. Banks produced a document from his briefcase. I have here a copy of an email sent from your account to your father 3 weeks ago. Would you mind reading the highlighted portion for the court? Jake accepted the paper, his face paling slightly as he scanned the text. It says, Dad, I know the farm means everything to you, but maybe it's time to consider Agritech's offer. Everything's changing anyway, and fighting these corporate giants just means we all get crushed in the end. Those were your words, correct? Banks pressed. Yes, but... And 2 days ago, after these alleged devices were discovered, you had another conversation with your father. Isn't it true that you suggested the family could use these findings to negotiate a better sale price from Agritech? Jake's eyes flashed with anger. That's a complete misrepresentation of a private family discussion. Please answer the question, Mr. Bradley. Did you suggest leveraging these discoveries for financial gain? I mentioned that if Agritech was doing something illegal, they might be willing to increase their offer to avoid exposure. That's not the same as fabricating evidence for profit. Banks turned to Judge Collins with an expression of exaggerated concern. Your Honor, what we have here is clearly a family attempting to extract additional money from my client by manufacturing false claims about mysterious devices. These excavations are nothing more than an elaborate negotiation tactic. Objection, Patterson shouted. Counsel is testifying and making accusations without evidence. Sustained, Judge Collins ruled. Mr. Banks, save your closing arguments for the appropriate time. Banks smiled, the damage already done. No further questions for this witness. As Jake returned to his seat, his expression a mixture of anger and regret, Tom reached out to squeeze his son's shoulder. It's all right, he whispered. They're twisting everything because they're desperate. Judge Collins called for closing arguments. Banks went first, painting a picture of a struggling family farming operation, resorting to desperate measures to increase the value of land they could no longer maintain. He characterized Agritech as a responsible corporate citizen being extorted through false allegations. Your Honor, he concluded, the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. Is it more likely that a respected agricultural corporation is engaging in a massive conspiracy to control water resources, or that a financially troubled farmer is seeking leverage for a better selling price? We ask that you grant the injunction immediately to prevent further damage to vital environmental resources. Patterson's closing argument was less polished but more passionate. He walked the court through the timeline of events, Agritech's aggressive land acquisition strategies, the sudden appearance of regulatory problems for anyone who refused their offers, and the undeniable physical evidence of unauthorized devices on Bradley property. Your Honor, he said, this case is about more than one family farm. It's about the future of agriculture in the American heartland. If corporations can secretly manipulate water resources to drive independent farmers off their land, then the entire system of family farming that built this nation is at risk. The evidence is clear. These devices exist. They were placed without permission, and they are designed to artificially control water flow. We ask that you deny the injunction and allow the federal investigation to continue for the protection of all farmers in this region. Judge Collins removed her glasses, studying both attorneys before speaking. This case presents unusual circumstances that require careful consideration. I'll recess for 1 hour to review the evidence before rendering my decision. Court is adjourned until 2 p.m. As the courtroom emptied, Tom felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The outcome of this hearing would determine not just the fate of his farm, but potentially the future of water access for thousands of family farms across the Midwest. Dr. Martinez joined the Bradley family in a small conference room provided by the court. They played their hand well, she admitted. Using Jake's private communications to suggest financial motivation was a calculated move. How did they even get those emails? Jake asked, his voice tight with anger. Corporate espionage is standard procedure for operations this size, Agent Chen explained, joining them with coffee cups for everyone. They likely hacked your accounts months ago, gathering ammunition to use if needed. Tom stared into his coffee, processing everything that had happened. If we lose this injunction, what then? They'll shut down our investigation, Dr. Martinez replied. The devices will remain operational and their plan continues. More drought, more struggling farms, more generous purchase offers that desperate. Farmers can't refuse. And if we win? Emma asked. We continue documenting, building a case that not even their lawyers can dismiss. We expand the investigation to other properties, connect all the dots, and present evidence of a coordinated attempt to monopolize water resources. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. When they finally returned to the courtroom, Tom noticed that Victor Kozlov had moved to the plaintiff's table, sitting confidently beside his legal team. The gallery was even more crowded than before, as word of the morning's revelations had spread throughout the county. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Collins returned. After everyone was seated, the judge surveyed the courtroom with measured gravity. This case presents complex issues involving property rights, environmental protection, and potentially criminal activity. Having reviewed the evidence presented by both sides, I am prepared to rule on the injunction request. Tom felt Emma's hand tighten around his. Jake leaned forward, tension evident in every line of his body. The plaintiff has requested an injunction to halt all excavation activities on the Bradley property based on alleged environmental concerns. However, the evidence indicates that these environmental concerns are not only unsubstantiated, but may, in fact, be pretextual, designed to conceal the very activities the plaintiff claims to be concerned about. Banks shifted uncomfortably in his chair as Judge Collins continued. The presence of sophisticated electronic devices buried on private property without the owner's knowledge or consent raises serious legal questions that cannot be dismissed. The federal investigation into these devices and their potential impact on regional water resources must be allowed to continue. Tom felt a surge of hope as the judge's direction became clear. Therefore, I am denying the plaintiff's request for an injunction. Furthermore, I'm ordering that all devices discovered on the Bradley property be preserved as evidence pending a full investigation by appropriate federal authorities. Any attempt to remove, disable, or tamper with these devices will constitute contempt of court. Banks was immediately on his feet. Your Honor, we respectfully request a stay pending appeal to the Circuit Court. These devices represent proprietary technology that... So you're acknowledging the devices belong to Agritech, Mr. Banks? Judge Collins interrupted. Just moments ago, you characterized them as fabrications by the Bradley family. Banks faltered, caught in his own contradiction. That is, if such devices exist as described, they would contain proprietary technology that my client has a right to protect. Your request for a stay is denied, Judge Collins stated firmly. This court takes very seriously the allegation that private entities may be attempting to manipulate water resources affecting thousands of farms and communities. The investigation will proceed without interference. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and movement. Tom turned to embrace Emma, relief flooding through him. They hadn't won the war, but this crucial battle had gone their way. Dr. Martinez was already on her phone, coordinating next steps with her team. Agent Chen gave Tom a rare smile. This is just the beginning, he said. Now the real work starts. As people filed out of the courtroom, Tom noticed Kozlov standing alone, his expression thunderous. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, Tom understood that while they had won today, the fight was far from over. Kozlov gave an almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement of a worthy opponent, before turning to leave with his legal team. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted by the unusual nature of the emergency hearing. As Tom emerged, Into the afternoon sunlight, cameras turned in his direction and questions were shouted from all sides. "Mr. Bradley, can you comment on the devices found on your property? Is Agritech really trying to control water resources? How long has this investigation been ongoing?" Dr. Martinez stepped forward, her federal credentials commanding immediate attention. "The investigation is active and ongoing. We can confirm that devices discovered on private property appear designed to manipulate underground water flow, potentially affecting agricultural conditions across multiple states. The federal government takes any threat to our nation's food security extremely seriously, and we will pursue this investigation wherever it leads." As she fielded questions with professional precision, Jake pulled Tom aside. "Dad, I'm sorry. About those emails, I never thought they'd be used against us like that." Tom squeezed his son's shoulder. "Nothing to apologize for. You were worried about the family, about the future. That's natural. What matters is that when the moment came to make a stand, you stood with me." Emma joined them, her expression reflecting the mixture of relief and anxiety they all felt. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Tom replied, "we go home and continue the work. The farm doesn't stop needing attention just because we're caught up in all this." They made their way through the crowd to where Sheriff Henderson waited, beside his patrol car. "Thought you folks might appreciate an escort home," he offered. "Lot of unfamiliar vehicles around town today." "Thanks, Bill," Tom said, accepting the gesture for what it was, a public declaration of support from local law enforcement. As they drove back to Cedar Ridge Farm, Tom watched the familiar landscape roll by. Fields parched by drought stretched to the horizon, a visible reminder of why this fight mattered. It wasn't just about one family farm or even one corporate scheme. It was about who would control the future of agriculture in America. Families who worked the land with their own hands, or distant corporations who saw soil and water as commodities to be manipulated for profit. When they arrived home, Tom was surprised to find neighbors gathered in his driveway. The Wilsons, the Hendersons, even old Frank Wilson, who had sold his land months ago. They stood together holding casserole dishes and thermoses of coffee, a rural community's traditional show of support. "Heard you stood up to those Agritech folks in court," Pete Wilson said, stepping forward to shake Tom's hand. "Thought you might appreciate not having to worry about dinner tonight." "Word's spreading about what they've been up to," added Martha. "Henderson, those mysterious devices controlling who gets water, it's not right. We wanted you to know you're not alone in this fight." As Tom looked at the faces of his neighbors, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. The isolation Agritech had so carefully cultivated was breaking down. The truth was emerging, community bonds were being renewed, and a sense of common purpose was taking root. The impromptu gathering moved to the Bradleys' back porch, where food was shared and stories exchanged. Dr. Martinez and her team were welcomed into the circle, the initial wariness giving way to appreciation for their role in uncovering the truth. As twilight settled over the drought-stricken fields, Tom stood slightly apart, looking out over the land his family had nurtured for generations. The West pasture, once just another part of their farm, now represented the front line in a battle for the very soul of American agriculture. Jake joined him, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "You know," he said, passing one to his father, "I've been thinking about the restaurant." "Oh, maybe it's time to expand, not just serving local food, but telling the story behind it. The story of family farms fighting to survive, of communities coming together to protect their way of life." Tom nodded, understanding his son's vision. Every meal as an act of resistance. "Something like that," Jake agreed. "Remind people that what happens on farms like ours affects everyone who eats." From the porch, Emma called out that dessert was being served. Tom and Jake turned, back to join the gathering, but not before Tom took one last look at the land stretching before him. Whatever came next, federal investigations, corporate counterattacks, legal battles, the ground beneath his feet remained steady, a constant in an increasingly uncertain world. The simple act of helping a lost traveler had set in motion events that would reshape the future of farming across the heartland. Tom couldn't see the end of this journey, couldn't predict all the challenges they would face. But he knew this much: the Bradley family would face them together, standing firm on land they had stewarded for over a century, defending not just their own future, but the future of American agriculture itself. As darkness fell completely, the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had guided generations of farmers through seasons of plenty and seasons of hardship. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, surrounded by family and neighbors, Tom Bradley allowed himself to savor this moment of community and resolve. The drought would end eventually, as all droughts do. The land would heal, crops would grow, and life would continue. But something fundamental had changed, a realization that the challenges facing modern agriculture weren't just about weather or markets, but about power and control. Who would decide which farms survive and which disappear? Who would determine the future of rural America? These questions had no simple answers, but as Tom rejoined the gathering on his porch, he knew that asking them openly was the first step toward ensuring that future generations would have the chance to work the land as his family had, with independence, dignity, and a deep connection to the soil beneath their feet. 6 months later, as the first real rainfall in nearly 2 years soaked the fields of Millbrook Valley, a different convoy approached Cedar Ridge Farm. No black SUVs this time, but government vehicles bearing the seal of the Department of Justice, accompanied by news vans from national networks. Tom stood on his porch, watching as Dr. Martinez stepped out of the lead car, a folder of documents in her hand and a smile of triumph on her face. "It's over," she called as she approached. "Federal grand jury has returned indictments against Agritech's entire executive team. Conspiracy, violation of environmental laws, corporate espionage, tampering with critical infrastructure, 17 counts in all." Emma emerged from the house, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "They're actually going to prison." "Some will," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "Others will face massive fines and restrictions. But most importantly, their entire water manipulation network is being dismantled. The artificial drought conditions should normalize within months." Tom looked out at the rain falling on his fields, already imagining the crops that would grow in the coming season. And the other farms? The ones that were sold under pressure? The Department of Agriculture is establishing a special fund to help original owners repurchase their land if they choose to. Those who prefer to stay where they are will receive compensation. Later that evening, as national news crews set up for broadcasts from the farm that had become the center of a landmark case against corporate water manipulation, Tom slipped away to the west pasture. The excavation sites had been filled in, the harmful devices removed and secured as evidence. The land was healing, returning to its natural state. He knelt to scoop up a handful of soil, feeling its texture, noting the healthy moisture content that had been missing for so long. This was what mattered, not the headlines or the legal victories, but the earth itself, now free to follow its natural rhythms without artificial interference. Tomorrow would bring more interviews, more questions, more discussions about the implications of the case for agricultural policy and corporate regulation. But tonight, alone in his field with the gentle rain washing over him, Tom Bradley was simply a farmer once again, connected to his land and grateful for the chance to continue the legacy his family had built over 4 generations. The tourist who had appeared lost on his driveway had changed everything. revealing a truth that might otherwise have remained buried beneath his fields. Because of that chance encounter, or perhaps not by chance at all, the future of farming in Millbrook Valley and beyond would follow a different path, one where family farms could continue to thrive alongside modern agriculture, where water remained a resource for all rather than a commodity controlled by few. As Tom walked back toward the lights of his farmhouse, he felt the weight of his ancestors walking beside him. 4 generations of Bradleys who had preserved this land through challenges they could never have imagined. He had kept faith with their legacy, ensuring that the farm would pass to future generations not as a corporate holding, but as a living connection to the principles that had sustained rural America since its beginning. "The land doesn't belong to us," his father had often said. "We belong to the land." Tonight, with rain soaking into soil that was finally freed from artificial manipulation, that ancient wisdom felt more true than ever. The Bradleys were caretakers, not owners, participants in an ageless cycle of nurturing the earth that nurtures humanity in return. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, in the gentle rain, a humble farmer who had helped a lost traveler walked toward home, secure in the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.